So in my final section of my critique of Bishop Barron and his unreasonable hope that all may be saved are his practical conclusions section. It says, the question is, if we can hope that all are saved, what's the point of Christianity? Why should a non-Christian ever consider converting? And then he says, well, I mean, yeah, because maybe, essentially it's maybe I'm horribly wrong, maybe it's not reasonable, but he doesn't want to phrase it that way. He just wants to say, oh, because maybe, yeah, we're still going to hell. And then he makes this brilliant analogy, an analogy that may also help. Suppose you were trying to cross a dangerous river, and I told you that told you there was a sturdy bridge just about 2 miles downstream over which you could easily cross. But suppose you replied, well, that's a long walk. Why can't I just try and build a little raft and paddle across here? I might say, well, you could do that, but it's certainly possible you could get across. But friend, why not take the surest, safest route to get across the river, one that many people have used and know will work? Why risk your life with a more dangerous alternative, even if it's technically possible to get that they may get you across? Well, the problem with this analogy, it actually denies the church's understanding of outside the church there is no salvation, because it says those who, knowing that the church was made necessary for salvation and reject it, those persons cannot be saved. And this is actually what the Second Vatican Council said in the Catechism and in the Second Vatican Council, I should say. But so this analogy doesn't work. Furthermore, notice how he doesn't use the word reasonable here anymore. I really think that Bishop Barron regrets using the word reasonable, because he realized that reasonable means unreasonable. So just imagine if we were to reread the story, and instead of saying imagine the man replies, but Bishop Barron, you said that it's reasonable for me to have my little rubber dinghy to get across this deadly, treacherous rapids to this to the other side of the river. You said it was reasonable, and now you're telling me, I mean, it's possible, I mean, but it's not safe, it's dangerous, but you said it's reasonable. Well, I mean, if it's reasonable, why do I need to go to a bridge? And that's the truth. Telling people it's reasonable to be saved outside the church makes it sound like you really don't need the church. But he has a bizarre interpretation of reasonable. I mean, just imagine our criminal system functioning under his term of reasonable, beyond reasonable doubt. Okay, I guess any doubt, even the smallest, tiniest little doubt is reasonable. I mean, what? No, it doesn't work like that. But his analogy just completely fails. Similar case can be made for Christianity, the Christian faith, and particularly its sacraments, and it is the preferred means. I hate how that he always likes to use the word privileged or preferred. Means by which Christ wants to save us. It may be possible to be saved without the sacraments, but why take the risk? Why not follow the sure, trusted, proven path towards salvation, which is the Christian faith? Well, why would a person not want to become Christian? Because it's hard. Why do I have to walk 2 miles to the bridge? Why not just jump out here? Why do I have to walk all the way to a stupid bridge that maybe I have to pay a toll? Maybe I have to get on to the road. Maybe I have to get out of the way of traffic. Maybe I have to do all these other things to get to actually cross the bridge. It's just too much work. Why not just jump out? Because after all, we have reasonable hope to cross this river. Next, anyway, he says, if it's possible all could be saved, what's the point of evangelization? Why should the church evangelize if people are going to be saved anyways? Another very good point, because even though this isn't what Bishop Barron is saying, it will generally lead people to this conclusion, to which he has a rebuttal later on, saying, well, yeah, of course it could have bad implications, but so can other things. But anyway, so this objection makes sense when directed towards universalists, but neither Hans von Balthasar nor Bishop Barron are universalists. Neither has one claim to know that all men are saved, they take a much more modest approach. In fact, their positions should foster evangelization, not undermine it. Well, it's funny because we could actually pull up a statement by Pope Benedict XVI saying that essentially the teaching of a sort of a related doctrine relating to like anonymous Christians and an overemphasis of the implicit abilities of baptism of desire have killed evangelization. He's saying the more we emphasize it, the less evangelization we did. But, well, let's not go into that. Then he says it should foster evangelization, not undermine it. Why? Because evangelization is the mechanism by which Christ wants to save all his people. It's not only because evangelists tirelessly work to spend their faith and lead people to conversion that they hope in the possibility of them being saved. That we can hope in the possibility of them being saved. As Bishop Barron says, the God of the Bible delights in the workings of the secondary causes. Therefore, the ardent witness of the deeply committed evangelists, teachers, and missionaries might well be precisely the means by which God designs to bring his people to eternal life. This hope of the salvation of all ought not to be dampen the missionary spirit, but rather to stir it up. Yes, nothing stirs it up more than saying, oh, maybe everybody's going to heaven. No, it doesn't work like that. People don't work like that, Bishop Barron. Paul in his ministry, he actually, even though he tries to quote, you try to quote him as saying, maybe everybody's going to heaven, Paul actually says, I try to save some, because he knows not all are going to be saved. That's why he says he's going to try to save some, that he tries to become all things to all men in hopes that some might be saved. If the dare we hope view did, in fact, undermine the evangelical fervor, we should expect Bishop Barron and the ministry he has founded and directed to be tepid and fruitless. But on the contrary, Bishop Barron and the Word of Faith remain the world leaders in evangelization and have inspired countless others to evangelize as well. Well, I don't know where he gets the claim that they're world leaders, and maybe because he doesn't every other day mention this doctrine, maybe that helps by not actually talking about it, because after all, even Origen had to essentially deny being a universalist when talking with non-Christians, because obviously, what's the point of becoming a Christian? But anyway, let's go on. Hasn't this dare we hope view led to practical universalism in the pews? Even if it might be technically true, shouldn't we stop promoting it? Then he says, well, if Catholics' Marian devotion went too far, maybe we should stop promoting Marian devotion. For example, the true devotion of Mary, one of Pope John Paul II's books, Louis de Montfort writes, everyone from the end of one earth to from the earth to the other, in the highest heaven and the lowest abyss, all things preach, all things proclaim the wondrous Virgin Mary. So he quotes this to try to say, oh, maybe we should get rid of this Marian doctrine, but he's saying, no, we can't ignore just because it can be abused. It doesn't mean we shouldn't. We have to abolish it, which it's very precarious. But the issue is that not that many people nowadays even are on the border of Mariolatry, worshipping the Virgin Mary like they did in 5th century Arabia. There's very few of those, but there are a lot of people who don't believe in hell. There are a ton of people who believe can never really meet the conditions to commit a moral sin. There are a ton of people who just assume everybody's going to heaven except maybe Osama bin Laden, Abu Bakr, al-Baghdadi, and people like Hitler and Stalin, Mao Zedong. Everybody else is just going to heaven by default. So that's the huge difference, because everybody else, this is pretty much assumed by many people, and you're just throwing fuel into the fire by saying it's reasonable. So he says the answer is no. what we should do is clarify St. de Montfort's position and correct the distortions, not get rid of the work altogether. Similarly, we should not stop promoting Dare We Hope, even though it's a heresy, or any other permissible view for that matter, even though it's actually a heresy. And just because people are misunderstanding and misapplying it, never mind that some of us aren't misapplying it or misunderstanding it. If a particular view is leading to bad conclusions, that doesn't make the view false. Oh, man. If that's happening, we can simply need to correct the distorted interpretations and outcomes. It's important to recognize, though, that we're now in the realm of prudence. Whether it's prudence to promote a particular view or not, given its ramifications, this is wholly different than whether or not the view in question is true or orthodox. I don't think you would want to apply this to other doctrines. Oh, man. Are you saying it's possible that Hitler is in heaven, or at least not in hell? Saint Hitler. He says, yes, it's possible. Funny how he changes the word to possible again instead of saying reasonable. He doesn't say it's reasonable. That's not to say it's probable or expected, but we must acknowledge the fact that God's mercy reaches to the very depths of God-forsakenness to the worst of sinners and remains an offer until every person's last dying moment. That's a true statement, but again, it's unlikely, especially concerning Hitler shot himself in a bunker in Germany with his sort of girlfriend. The bottom line is this: we cannot put limits on God's divine mercy, nor on the powers of God's grace at the moment of human death. As St. Faustina affirmed in her diary, the greater the sinner, the greater the right to your mercy, O Lord. So he tries to apply particular and generalize it, but if we're to have reasonable hope that all men be saved, why isn't it reasonable to hope that Hitler will be saved? He doesn't want to use this terminology. He just wants to say it's possible but not probable. Again, poor terminology on Bishop Barron's part. Anyway, this is my final installment of